Morning. Now, on to our next guest. I'm very excited to see you again, Congressman Michael Guest, who represents Mississippi's 3rd District. Good morning.
Good morning. How was your flight home last night? Uneventful, I hope?
Yes, very uneventful. I know you're familiar with those direct flights. I take the direct one into Memphis. I know you take the direct one back into Jackson. But anyway, easy peasy, nothing to complain. So good to be back here in Oxford, I do have to say.
Well, I'm glad you're home. I hope to be coming home this evening after we get finished with votes. And just, again, want to thank you for coming up yesterday, testifying before a very important oversight committee. And so thank you for your continued support as we try to push back against the policies of this administration. So just want to let you know how much I and other conservative members of Congress appreciate what you're doing in your role. The fact that you volunteer your time to come up here and be part of what we're trying to do means a lot. So I just personally want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's always wonderful to run into you and fellow Mississippians as we're up there. You know, with the left these days, it is a target-rich environment. I know you've been fighting for Mississippi and pushing back. There's a lot going on the Hill. I do want to get in a little bit of, could you give us the latest on the funding bill has been a topic of high interest and conversation. The September 30th deadline is coming up, and there's been some back and forth. What's the latest that you're seeing?
You're exactly right. Just to give kind of some of your listeners a little bit of background, government funding expires at the end of the month. And so Congress would either have to pass the appropriations bills or a mechanism commonly known as a continuing resolution or CR to keep the government funded at existing levels. We're not going to be able to pass those spending bills between now and the end of next week. So it does appear that a CR is going to be necessary. There was a bill put on the floor this week by the Speaker, a bill which I and the other Republican members of the delegation voted to support, which would have been a temporary funding. But with that, the Speaker attached the SAVE Act, and the SAVE Act is legislation that's previously been passed out of the House that Chuck Schumer has refused to take up in the Senate. And so we attached it to the spending bill to force the Senate to take that up. And that bill is something that has widespread Republican support, has the support of the president, which says that when an individual registers to vote for the first time, that they have to prove or show proof of citizenship. And so it is very simple. It is an election integrity bill. It makes sure that the only people voting in federal elections are United States citizens. And so that was attached to the funding bill. But unfortunately, all but 2 Democrats voted against that potential piece of legislation. And then there were a handful of Republicans which did not support it for various reasons. And so now that CR has failed, leadership is back to the drawing board. As I understand, they're looking at a couple of options to bring up next week. One would just be a clean CR to the end of the year. The other would be a CR to the end of the year, but trying to once again attach the SAVE Act to that legislation. And so that will be a call that will be made by Speaker Johnson. As I understand, he has been in communications with President Trump on this as well. And so we will take something up next week, Mandy. I think it's still a little bit in flux. The only thing that I'm hearing, which is kind of more of a certainty, is that the CR would be a shorter CR. The CR we voted on this week was a 6-month CR. The new CR that they intend to put on the floor next week would be until either the dates I'm hearing are December the 13th or December the 20th. And I will tell you that there will be a lot of Republicans who will not support that. There will have to be Democrat support. There are Republicans like me who supported the previous CR because of the SAVE Act, because believed it was so important to be able to pass legislation dealing with election integrity. But if the Speaker or leadership decides to pull the SAVE Act from the CR, I will tell you that I think there will be a large number of Republicans, including myself, who would not be supportive of a clean CR that only extends the deadline into December.
Well, and the work that you're doing on election integrity is so important. There was a study this morning that came out that suggested as many as 2.7 million non-citizens could vote in the 2024 election if legislation like this bill that requires proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote doesn't actually go into place. It's crazy to me, Congressman, that non-citizens have the ability to vote, but you look at the state of play from the left, and that seems to be the thing they're banking on to try and win this election.
I mean, there's no doubt they're trying to grow their base, their voting base, by bringing illegal aliens into the voting booth. And we know that some cities, such as D.C., the city that where our nation's capital, they allow illegal aliens to vote in municipal elections. And so there is a trend that we're seeing that we think is very dangerous, which basically says that anybody who comes in the country should have a right to vote. And we think that that's wrong. Republicans are pushing back on that. This is common sense legislation. This should be legislation that every American should be able to get behind and support, which is the legislation that says if you're going to register to vote, you got to prove you're a citizen. But yet we've seen that the Democrats did not support this, or the majority of Democrats did not support this as standalone legislation earlier this year. Chuck Schumer has refused to take it up on the Senate floor. And then when the Speaker tried to attach this to a funding bill to force Schumer to do something, we see that all but 2 Democrats voted that down. And so that only tells me one thing. That tells me that Democrats want illegal aliens to have the ability to vote, that they don't think this is the problem, that they're not worried about election integrity, and I think that that's wrong. I think people need to be able to have confidence that when people go to the polls, that the only people are voting are those people who are lawfully registered, those people who are U.S. citizens, and that everybody's vote counts, and that some people's vote don't count more than others. And so it is very discouraging for myself, for you, for other conservative members to see that the Democrat Party is completely setting up roadblock after roadblock for the things that Republicans want to do to secure our elections.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're drawing the line on this, because it's disgusting to think that American citizens' votes could be discounted because illegal aliens are allowed to vote in U.S. Elections. It really is frustrating to see. I know we're quickly running out of time here, and there's, as we said, there's a target-rich environment. I know you're involved in another piece of legislation. I believe it's coming to the floor this week, or it will be relatively soon, really pushing back against the left's and this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, to mandate electric vehicles and to put internal combustion or gas-powered engine vehicles out of commission. Could you talk to us a little bit about that bill, what you're hoping to achieve, and where it is?
Yeah, this legislation will be on the floor actually today, and it will end a rule put in place by the EPA, an agency that you know well, an agency that has gone extremely woke since you and other conservatives have left. And this is legislation sponsored by a good friend of mine, John James, from the state of Michigan. John actually has family in Starkville, Mississippi, and he comes back every other Thanksgiving to visit his grandparents there. But this bill would roll back a rule that the EPA has put in place that would require by 2032 that 2/3 of all vehicles reach a emission standard that is, I won't say impossible, but very difficult for many of the internal combustion engines to reach. And so this is just a sleight of hand move to force electric vehicles on the American people. And look, I have no problems with the electric vehicles if someone wishes to buy an electric vehicle, but requiring people to purchase certain types of vehicles is wrong. That should be a product of the free market. It should not be forced upon us by government intervention, by government mandate. And so this is, in essence, a government mandate that by 2032, that a large majority, over half of the current vehicles on the road that use internal combustion engines, they will not be allowed to be manufactured. And this is just another push, another effort to enforce the Green New Deal by the Biden-Harris administration.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you're pushing back against that. Save our cars, Congressman. Save our vote. Keep up the good fight. Thank you for joining us this morning.